I would like to hand over to my fellow board member, Mike Doherty. Mike, are you in the room? And he is going to invite the Space Literacy and Career Readiness panel up to the stage. If you would also please come, thank you. And then Mike Doherty will introduce each of you as you arrive, and we will go ahead and get started. Thanks, everybody.
It goes without saying how excited I am to be here, but I am. Let me just open up a few notes, and I wanted to say a few remarks to get our panel kicked off, and this is the group that's going to do the work. Very good. So first of all, just by way of introduction, I am a member of the Keystone Space Collaborative Board. I'm excited to be here with you today. It's been quite a journey. You know, we've been at this 2 years. I'm looking over at Jonathan. I remember when we first got started. We've come a long way, but frankly, as I said at dinner last night, it really wasn't about that team as much as it was about we stumbled across or at least knew enough that there was this burgeoning opportunity that was just waiting to come out. And I think the people that are here today, the excitement that I hear and see in this room is this evidence that we've got a underdeveloped and untapped opportunity, and we're just beginning. So we're very excited about that. My day jobs, I'll just give you a quick overview of that. I've got a couple of them. One is I'm executive director of a nonprofit called Into Market that is focused on accelerating industrial innovation in the region. You'll be hearing from Petra Mitchell from Catalyst Connection tomorrow. She leads something called the AIM Hire Consortium. We're supporting that. Into Market is also helping to try to convene the right public-private partnerships for attracting a hydrogen and low-carbon manufacturing hub to the region as well. So excited to be part of that. And then finally, I run a small ventures company called Next Big, based in here in Pittsburgh, and I'm a Pittsburgh native. But enough about me. What I'm really excited about is this group of panelists we have. Justine asked me to moderate this one, and I couldn't be happier. When I did the pre-planning call with this group, it just became so apparent that they're going to bring a lot to this. I'm actually going to have them, after I do these opening remarks, make a few deeper opening remarks about their own stories and journeys. But let me just take you through this. First of all, we've got Nicole Shafer, who's Senior Director of STEM Education at Carnegie Science Center. KSC is our hosting partner, and we couldn't be happier and appreciate that support, of course. Sam Ryman, who's on the other end, is Director for the R.K. Mellon Foundation. Sam and R.K. Mellon have a long history of investing in inclusive economic development in our region, and KSC is a proud recipient of R.K. Mellon funding, so we thank him for that as well. Welcome, Sam. And then our other Sam Moore, has a fun job. He is the founding executive director of the Moonshot Museum. I spoke too soon on the microphone. But Sam's going to talk to you a bit about his journey and what he's doing with that museum to help inspire the next generation of young people. And then we have Sean Tomaszewski, who's principal of Baldwin High School. And Sean is an educator and an education innovator. Sean also has some special guests. I won't steal all his thunder, but I'm hopeful he'll introduce them to us later. And then finally, we have Chris Allen, COO of Nova Space. Nova Space has also kindly agreed to sponsor this panel, and we're very appreciative of that. Chris will bring some great perspectives to the discussion. I'm also very happy to announce that the Keystone Space Collaborative and Nova Space have just signed an MOU. Without going into the details of that, we are partnering to co-develop new education materials, some of which will be free to KSC members. Some of this will be free as online content to the community, and then we'll be developing some custom content related to professional development and other pieces as well. So really trying to put into action our focus on education and training as part of the KSC mission. So I've provided my snapshot of who they are, but what I suggest we do is let's have each of our panelists just tell us a little bit about your journey, maybe what you're doing with your current role, and if you want to make an opening remark on this topic, great. Otherwise, I've got some questions to get us started. And if you don't mind just going in order, Nicole?
Excellent. Good afternoon. I hope you're all enjoying your dessert. I'm Nicole Shafer, and I jokingly said last evening I'm probably the only one in here without an engineering background or degree. And though I am the STEM director here, my journey has been very much one that has been a jigsaw puzzle of experiences that include many paths and a braided river, as they say, to get to where I am. And the work that I do here stems from a lot of the work that I did for the last 10 to 15 years, actually, in the development of a school here in the city of Pittsburgh. And learning from the ground up and working in many ways like a startup, you find out not only what you don't know, but you learn to build collaborations and connections with folks that are smarter than you and that can help guide and direct your organization in the best way possible. And so when I came on to the STEM Center here about one year ago, that has been my job as well, is to find the brightest and the best, the folks that have the mission to do something different in this city around specifically engaging students in new ways around STEM education, but science and science literacy. And the work that I'm doing here is really figuring out how to break down barriers, co-design and redesign experiences for students that break or open and create more access and opportunity, specifically to previously marginalized or historically underrepresented communities. So the work here today, and when we come back to talking about this more specifically around space, I will have that bent. I'm looking to say, how can we do this differently? How can we not replicate the work or the things that happened maybe in the development and explosion of Silicon Valley? If this is in fact an industry that we want to grow and foster, what have we learned from other industries to make it more inclusive and equitable from the ground up?
Thanks, Nicole. I'm Sean Tomaszewski. I am the very proud principal of Baldwin High School, right over the hill, on the other side of that hill. I am my career's primarily been associated with the life sciences. Most recently, I had a faculty position at Pitt where I taught physiology and pathology, but in hearing the conversation today, especially talking to the students from WVU and CCAC, I'll put my physics teacher hat on and remind everybody of something you have probably will remember from physics class, Bernoulli's principle, right? So as we think about the workforce pipeline, in my head, I'm imagining that workforce pipeline filled with people. And I think we have a problem, not just in this region, but more globally as far as this industry is concerned, because people are not flowing through that pipeline continuously or fluidly. There are gaps between the people flowing through that workforce pipeline. The fact that graduating senior in aerospace and mechanical engineering shared with us that he came to this conference today hoping to find companies that want to hire graduates like him suggests to me that there's a significant communication problem. And I hope that as the Keystone Space Collaborative comes together and becomes more organized in its efforts, that we can bolster that workforce pipeline so that we're providing students in K through 12 settings, in post-secondary graduate settings, with opportunities and experiences that open their eyes to the rich career possibilities in the industry. As Mike indicated, I'm here with 4 high school students from Baldwin High School. Ryan, Brandon, Alec, and Grace are in the back over there, and have certainly enjoyed chatting with you all throughout the morning, and we'll look forward to doing that into tomorrow too.
Cool. I'm Christopher Allen. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of NovaSpace. My expertise is in behavior change and creating technological spaces for people to practice skills so that they can have an opportunity to kind of plateau up into the quadrant of being both confident and competent in their skills. And it takes a lot to move people that distance. You have to think about the whole person. It's not just about what people know. We're hoping to achieve something where people are doing the right thing at the right time, and they know when the right time to perform is. That's a lot more complex than just saying, I'm going to share some information with you, and I hope you become excited about it and aware about it, right? There's a ton of things that I'm aware about in my own personal life that if I acted on them, I'd be better for it. I'd be a healthier, happier, more spiritual person. And awareness is not a goal enough. We need to go a lot farther and give people the opportunity to practice. And so Nova Space is really around giving people that opportunity to practice skills specifically for the space industry. And we've done some things with digital credentialing that allow people to have kind of the security and knowledge that their skills are verifiable. A good friend and colleague, Jonathan Finkelstein, is the CEO of Credly. They're the leading provider of digital credentials globally. And through work with the folks over at Credly, I think there's some interesting statistics about what people say their skills are on LinkedIn. And that's, there are more people on LinkedIn to claim that they've gone to Harvard Business School than have ever gone to Harvard in the entirety of the institution's existence. And this is important for us going forward into the future. So if you're a startup and you really want to hire somebody who's got skills, you think, we've got 10 people inside our organization, and that 11th person needs to contribute value right away. We can't miss on that hire. And as you look across, I think, the space industry, some of the leading organizations have thousands of open recs for positions, and they're all asking for a space experience. If those companies are going to be successful and they're going to have the type of culture where innovation is going to continue, they have to be confident that either they have a pipeline and ability to train people that are going to give them the skills to be successful in a relative short order, or that they can look back into the pool of the available workforce and say, you know what, I can see that Susie and that John have verifiable skills, and they would be a good fit for our organization. And I can't be more excited about the partnership that we've got growing here with the Keystone Space Collaborative and for its members, and looking forward to working with all of you to figure out what are the specific skills, not just the foundational, fundamental skills that are going to make you a space professional, but what are the specific skills that this region needs in order to be an economic powerhouse in space.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Pittsburgh. Excited to see you here. Excited to be up on stage with such a terrific group of people. My name is Sam Moore. I am not a graduate of Harvard Business School. And something we also discovered last night, in addition that there were many non-engineers in the room, is that there are many history majors in the room as well. So welcome to all the history majors here in Point View Hall today. Yeah. I am director of the Moonshot Museum. You've heard it mentioned probably a couple of times today, but you probably haven't been there. In fact, I know you haven't been there because we're not open yet. We're going to open in October as the first space museum in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the first museum on the planet that is at its core focused on career readiness for the contemporary space industry. We're opening just down the street from where we're seated right now with our partners at Carnegie Science Center at the headquarters of Astrobotic Technology. And for those of you who are joining tonight for tours, I'm really excited to see you there, show you the future museum space, and tell you a little bit more about it. We are taking a really unique approach to our museum space at Moonshot Museum in that a full wall of our museum is a wall of glass that looks in on the clean room assembly area where Astrobotic is building spacecraft. When you're at Moonshot Museum later tonight for a tour, you're going to have the same experience that a group of 7th or 8th graders on a field trip to Moonshot are going to have a year from now. Look through that glass and know that exactly what you're looking at as it's being worked on is going to end up on the surface of the moon in the weeks, the months that follow your visit. That connection point, that personal connection point is really important to us, and like each of you have actually said, takes us beyond that introduction and awareness to make those personal connections. We're also going to send students and our visitors at large on simulated lunar missions. So you're going to take on real challenges that space industry professionals face every day and encounter real career opportunities across the full spectrum of science, technology, and the arts that are available in the space industry. As a history major, I have decidedly little space in my background, but have had the opportunity to learn so much from people on this stage with me right now and also the wider space ecosystem here in our region. And what we're going to talk a lot about is, of course, the fact that these engineering, that these technical, that these scientific roles exist in space, but we also need a lot of designers. We need a lot of creative thinkers. We need HVAC technicians and aerospace technicians to make space grow and for it to become this trillion-dollar industry that we've been hearing about all day today. So we are a cog in a much larger machine of workforce development, career readiness here in the tri-state region, a much larger machine of STEAM learning here in the in the Keystone region, and excited to become an active player in that when we open later this year in October.
Hello, everyone. I am the other Sam on the panel today, Sam Reiman.
We should have sat farther apart.
We should have. Actually, there's still time for you to slow down. My name is Sam Ryman. I'm delighted to be here. I am the director and also a trustee of the Richard King Mellon Foundation, which is a philanthropy based here in Pittsburgh and was created in 1947 by R.K. Mellon and his wife Constance. And over the last few years, we have been working to put together what our new strategic plan is. And so in my role, I oversee the administration of the foundation, but also help guide the trustees in terms of developing our larger strategy for the region and the work that we do nationally. And for us, we made a commitment of allocating $1.2 billion over the next 10 years. And two of the pillars of that are our economic development and what we call our economic mobility programs. And for our foundation, we have a long history steeped in supporting science and technology innovation here in the region. R.K. Mellon was the seed investor in the creation of the School of Computer Science at Carnegie Mellon University. We've invested extensively in the life sciences. We've invested in a whole range of new technologies that have emerged out of those research university settings. And any place that we see where there's a market failure, where there aren't dollars, private dollars going into those spaces, it's a great place for philanthropy to play a role, with the expectation that at some point we can begin to shift and move away as the private sector does what it does best. One of the things that we observed, though, and that we discussed with the trustees at length when we went through our strategy discussions over the last couple of years, is that while we can point to a lot of the larger investments we've made to advance the region in science and technology, particularly in the fields of robotics, life science, artificial intelligence, and those different domains, we've not been as direct in preparing the next generation to be able to participate on the other side as far as the jobs that are going to be created in this new economy. And we know that it's become increasingly difficult for someone to just exit out of high school and to go right into one of those types of careers. So for us, the work that we're doing in the space industry is a natural extension of what we've been doing historically, investing in the Keystone Space Collaborative to bring groups like this together that wouldn't have the ability to do that, just to talk and to obtain the data that we need to understand where those career opportunities are or where they're going. And in addition, the investments we've made, like the seed investment we made in Sam and the team at the Moonshot Museum, to figure out what are the different ways that we can get kids in ages 0 to 24 to young adulthood interested in the sciences, interested in these types of careers, and also with the recognition that you don't have to have a science degree to be able to participate in this new economy that we're creating. So excited to be here and to be able to have this conversation with all of you in the panel.
Great, thanks to all of you, and I'm sure you share my understanding and excitement now of why it's such a great panel. In fact, what I was going to ask you, Sam, I would say which Sam, or Sam Ryman, Sam 2 or Sam 1, whichever you're going to do. Sam Ryman was how this topic sort of fit in with your mission, but you've already nailed that, so I'm going to move on from that, frankly. You know, one of the things I've seen come up in our pre-planning calls and discussions we've had here and discussions we've had prior is this focus of getting beyond the obvious of finding STEM kids that want to be astronauts and teaching them math and you know, going that route, the engineers of the world. I'm an engineer, there's nothing wrong with them, but we've talked about how we need more. So from your perspective, and maybe I'll start with you, Nikole, because you brought this up in our call as well. You know, how do we make sure, because of this historical expectation around space, how do we make this idea of space education more accessible and less scary, and make sure that we're doing what we can to get more people involved and engaged in it?
So using my history majors is I think we do need to look at industries that have exploded in our recent years and that have not made kind of the inclusivity goals that we have around a new economic driver. And so I use Silicon Valley as my example of, where and how, if we could go and turn back time, how might we do that differently? If we could change the way that, who was being invited to the table, who was getting the training to get those opportunities, who was getting the right phone calls, who was able to afford to stay and be in the spaces that were able to live and be in the right places at the right time. So I think first is thinking about historically what we've not done so well and making sure that we don't make those same mistakes, especially when a new opportunity like this is arising. I think the second piece is I think we've got to create more explicit pathways. And I think we all think we know them. And I often get a little bit nervous when I say this because I think pathways are never the one that we plan for. But I think creating some benchmarks and some milestones of how kids that either are graduating from high school, that are pre-graduating, that are not even graduate from high school, that are in, 13th grade, or in taking a gap year and not quite sure where they're going, or what that looks like in a post-secondary option. That we need to figure out those pathways. To do that, I would argue that our industry has to get really concise on what those occupational competencies that you have and that you need in your entry-level positions. What are they? Can you identify them? Are they trainable? And do you really need a 4-year or a 2-year degree to begin the ground-level work in those industries? That's the kind of information that you need to share with organizations like mine, the Carnegie Science Center, so that I can begin to work with school districts and post-secondary spaces like community colleges so that we can start expanding what it means to be an available and accessible talent pool for the jobs that you need. And then the third piece that I would say is, as employers, we've come out of a 2-year craziness of being in a workforce and a workplace that has completely changed the way in which we see and perceive work. I think that the way that our HR departments in each of your either small startups or your large organizations see and retain and think about training has to change as well, right? Rather than looking for somebody who will just move into a position without any training and hope for the best and use that resume that you think you double-checked on LinkedIn, or rather finding the attributes, the dispositions, the parts of the personality and the characteristics of someone who's ready to kind of try something new and being willing to take them on that journey with you. It's a change in how we think about work, but as we grow a new generation Z who are demanding different things from the workplace, for you to be competitive and to attract the right kind of folks, I think that these are some critical factors and moves that are going to have to be rumbled with in the coming years.
So maybe just staying on this topic of inclusive approaches, other comments that others want to build on here?
Well, a number of things. I think when we think about training and the opportunity to move into space, I think in general it's been an exclusive market to break into. And you've got a traditional pathway through an academic career, landing in a number of very few coveted spots at organizations that we all know to be a participant in space. Right now, as I look at the employment data for the space economy, it can no longer be exclusive. And so the opportunity, it's really important for us to figure out how do we go from what was a learning journey that was just for a few people because there was just a few opportunities to something that's really widespread. And that's going to require being able to connect with people in a variety of ways, because they're coming from different backgrounds where they have different beliefs about their own abilities. And we need to install in the future workforce that they all have the belief that they can be successful here. So under training, it's important for people to see themselves in the skills, in the stories and the challenges. I want to do that. I can imagine that someone is going to ask me to do that. this is something that I can see myself being successful in. And it's about creating enough set of experiences so that we can start to change people's beliefs. And learning and motivation applied together appropriately can do that in ways that at scale, especially using digital technology, that we can reach people where they didn't think they could be reached before as individuals. And it'll be imperative for us as we start to create challenge-based scenarios that we're showing people from all sorts of different, not just backgrounds, but life experiences before they got someplace, so that it isn't just about a pipeline of engineers, but it's a pipeline of talented, creative people who have diverse experiences in their background, who are going to foster new ways of thinking about things and innovation. And that kind of starts the stage for being more inclusive, is designing these experiences for everybody, because we need everybody on board in order to get the volume of talent that we need to be successful.
I was going to ask you, Sean, given that you're a principal and a high school teacher, I mean, what comes to mind for you in terms of ways to expose students to kind of beyond the obvious in terms of the career opportunities within the space sector?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, yeah, I think that we need to do a better job in making those experiences part of students' daily lives. Right now, we have in most high schools faculty in special positions, whether they're called gifted coordinators or what have you, STEM coordinators, that will pull certain kids out of school and place them into those opportunities and experiences. But what I have seen be way more impactful is to make those experiences mandatory, part of the formal curriculum to which students are exposed. There's a phenomenal collaboration between Science Center, Aviary, Warhol, all the Northside institutions that the Buell Foundation finances, that takes kids in Northside schools and puts them into those cultural institutions as part of their actual formal school-based experiences. I think until all of the 43 districts across the county and, you know, the dozens and dozens and dozens of additional districts within our small region around Pittsburgh, until all districts and schools are adopting that very purposeful, explicit connection between experiences at the Science Center and things that are actually going on in the curricula, it's going to be disarticulated and insufficient.
If you don't mind, Chris, I remember from our phone call, you talked about some experiences in the Minneapolis or Minnesota region around, I think it was that idea of belief and what, sort of generational belief and what's possible. Would you mind talking a little bit about that?
Sure. In areas that have been disproportionately impacted by COVID, I mean, North Minneapolis kind of lost a generation of kids because of a number of things. But as they're exiting high school, where you've got low graduation rates, there's a belief that my high school education is not going to be enough, and I'm not going to go to college, right? And so when you look around at other people who are in your life and what they're doing, you don't see the type of level of success that for you starts to reach out and go, you know what, space maybe is for me, right? You see mom and dad maybe work on, a retail job or something, having a life of crime or not living to their fullest. And that starts to put, I think, early in the child's mind that even if I did well in high school, I'm not going to amount to much. And I think the opportunity, like forcing them to go out and experience all of these other things, is the start to maybe open some eyes that maybe, yes, I could do it. And it needs to continue. So, once we've started that spark, we've got a little bit of motivation to work with, a little bit of aspiration to work with. And now it's about seeding enough experiences that you can start to pull those things through. When I look at the space industry, until recently, don't have a whole lot of space-related folks in my life, right? And so space wasn't on my mind at all. And so it's about providing enough of a framework here through education and experience and outreach that we can start to seed for people who might not have thought that level of success or that type of career would be for me, that it can be. And really do a lot to not just push information, but to design something where the individual sees themselves in those actions.
Let me bring industry into the topic now. So we had an industry council inaugural meeting this morning. A great group of 8 companies have come together and are committing to continue to meet with each other and support our efforts together. And we've already challenged them to connect to this initiative around how can they be a part of the answer here. So let me just put this to the group in general. You know, what role do you see industry playing? And let's not talk only about the K through 12. Let's also talk about workforce development and you know, inclusivity of others in the region as well. So who wants to maybe open this topic up?
I'll start, I think. So I don't work for Astrobotic. I work for Moonshot Museum, private or a separate 501c3 nonprofit. But what I do have is a really, really fascinating front row seat to their work. They don't let me play in their sandbox, but they let me watch them play in their sandbox. And I think what's really interesting about the model that we're building with the Moonshot Museum and Astrobotic partnership is they are making a number of choices that on their face are kind of unusual for a commercial space company, right? They're pulling back the curtain. They're letting me bring in thousands of visitors every year, thousands of children to see the work that they're doing in real time in a space that is generally pretty constrained by intellectual property and ITAR considerations and everything that goes along with that. And I think, though that is at the kind of far end of the extreme of the spectrum, I think when we think about industry and access to industry, I would challenge everyone in the room today, whether you're in manufacturing or in aerospace, to think about, on one hand, how many internships you offer, right? If it's 5, could it be 10? And then also to think about how you break down those barriers so that it's more than a slide deck presentation at a job fair or career day when you're going into a high school. And please keep doing that because it's powerful and it reaches kids. But we can be doing more than that. And honestly, if you all want to be hiring people 10, 15, 20 years from now who are interested in working for your companies and have the skill sets that you need them to have, that's work that we've got to be doing now. And a lot of that onus does fall on industry, both to connect with people like Nikole and Sean and myself and Sam, who are, well, actually everyone on the stage, Christopher too, who are working with school districts and creating those pathways, those blended kind of rivers to get to the end goal, as well as reaching out yourselves and showing that you are an industry that is exciting to work for and hiring and interested in helping this next generation of workers succeed.
I had a interesting conversation with one of the high school students earlier today, and it made me think about this as well as what Christopher said, is this opportunity to practice. So if you haven't been in a high school recently or you don't have a child that's in high school, there is really very little opportunity to practice in high school at this point in time, right? So the idea of a liberal arts opportunity to explore things, to test things out, to understand what you might be interested in, that has really kind of gone by the wayside. So you're either pegged as a math student, you're pegged as a science student, you're pegged in the humanities, or you've opted out by a miserable experience with a teacher, right? And who has told you you're not good at one of those things. And so when we've lost the opportunity for that exploration and practice, you're actually missing, and if we're talking about kids that don't go on to traditional liberal arts education because it's priced out, what are the ways that industry can create opportunities to practice, to think about the models of residencies, the models of teacher practicums, of ways in which you're learning and understanding and making mistakes on the job and not being fired for it, and yet being able to have a conversation with a mentor or a colleague or someone alongside you to say, well, that was a big fat, hairy mistake, but thank God we didn't have anybody on the moon, right? So that those are the chances that we have for kids to also say, hey, this isn't really what I thought it was gonna be. I'd like to pivot my career a bit more this way. Knowing, as we know now, that no one stays in a career, although I heard some of our NASA folks say that they've been in that career for 39 years. That's highly unusual, right? So you've got to be ready and have a market within your culture that celebrates the idea that somebody is growing, not staying put or static in that particular job.
I want to say one thing on that. The skills that we have, not just in space, in all industries, the skills that we're applying as professionals aren't as durable as they used to be. And what we're doing today is not the same thing that we were doing 4 years ago. And not only are people switching careers, often, but the methods in which they're doing these sorts of things is flipping over. And practice really is key to getting to that point of I really know when the time is to perform, and I'm confident that I'm going to do the right thing. But more than anything else, I think as an industry, supporting people to continue to reinvest in acquiring new skills and coming to a framework as an individual organization that here's what it takes to learn new skills, and for the individual to understand that it takes real effort. It's not something that's passive. You got to put blood, sweat, and tears to acquiring new skills. And it's not something that you can learn in a 1-hour webinar with a snack and other stuff that you're doing at the same time. You need an opportunity to fail and see what failure looks like. And I think the workforce of the future, which is here, needs to be comfortable with the fact that the skills that they have right now and today are far less durable than they thought. And that one of their core competencies is going to be the acquisition of new skills. And the space industry is not unlike all the others out there that are experiencing this phenomenon.
And I'll just wrap up with a point that we have a really powerful example of how industry can partner with K-12 schools specifically. Brianna McKinnon, who is right back there from PNC, started a program called Partner Up Pittsburgh, where she has for several years now worked with high schools and high school students to take them from their senior year of high school and port them directly into entry-level positions in corporations across the region. And these corporations, they might have some sort of humanistic values, it's possible, but I mean, they wouldn't be doing this if it didn't serve their corporate interests either. It makes dollars and cents for them. And hearing from Brianna about the retention data from PNC in particular is extremely impressive. If you're looking for employees that will stick around with your companies for an extended period of time, getting them when they're younger and growing them academically, professionally, personally, can be a really powerful strategy. And Brianna has had awesome success with doing that.
Great discussion, and maybe to put a little bit of a twist on it, and Sam Ryman, I'd like to ask you this as well, based on your background. We talk in the Keystone Space Collaborative about the importance of building an ecosystem, which to me, that it's an overused word perhaps, but the idea of interdependency is what's really at play there. The idea that that system has to work as a system to function. And Sam Ryman, I'm pointing to you because your deep experience, at least locally here, around economic development programs and understanding the assets and challenges of our universities, our disadvantaged communities, our corporate world. How do you think of, in this context of education and career readiness for the space field, what kind of things come to mind in terms of the importance of this ecosystem functioning as a system?
Well, I think back to some of the conversations that have already taken place around how do you build the appropriate workforce systems, how do you identify pathways. Part of what we try to do at the foundation, I think, in as much as we're very interested in all those ideas and very tangible outcomes, I'll use a space example of we don't want to spend all of our time counting stars. We understand it's dark matter that holds the universe together, and we want to learn more about that, right? And this ecosystem is an example of that. Like, there are people and relationships here that are going to generate opportunities for some kid in Baldwin that we can't even possibly imagine right now. And if any one of us looks around at each other and thinks about our own pathways, none of us had some linear, we started here, someone intervened when we were 18, gave us this set of skills, and now there are probably some exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, I think we all tend to look back at the randomness of our own lives and then reflect on how in the world did we even get to where we are. I like to say my education prepared me for a career I didn't know existed. So there's no clear path that can be engineered for a lot of these things. So for the foundation, we want to invest in those quantifiable skills-based programs, things that we know are evidence-based that do demonstrate that someone gains a material benefit from having participated in it. But we have to stay focused on these things that if you're just looking at them in the first couple of years or 3 years, you're gonna have a really hard time understanding what the value is, but you know it matters. You know this is really, this group, these individuals here, people who care, that are gonna bring interns into their programs, they're gonna work with them, meet kids where they are, genuinely invest in their futures, and not ask for anything in return. That's what's gonna make the difference here in terms of making this a broadly accessible industry for everyone.
So I think we have about 15 minutes left, if I'm right on the timing. I want to make sure we save time for some audience questions, though. Let me just transition into one last theme for the group, and then we'll open it up, and that's about a call to action. I'd like us to think ahead a year from now where we want to be with this and what we've done to get there. Maybe start with this topic of communication, because I think that's something that's come up quite a bit. How do we make sure we're communicating opportunities, making both the awareness as well as the opportunities? What comes to mind in terms of what we should be paying attention to as we put action plans in place?
I mean, I would say, just like Nicole said earlier, we have to, as educators, develop a sense of the competencies and skills that the industry expects students entering in various levels of career fields need to possess. That communication, I think, needs to occur first. Once we as educators have an awareness of those expectations, we can establish programming to support getting students to meet those expectations. But right now, we don't really have an awareness of what those competencies or expectations that you all have of students are.
I would add communications on the other side too, in terms of the industry partners, and Pittsburgh is notorious for not telling its story well. We tend to be very humble. It's a rarity that we will celebrate in the way that other cities would for successes that are far more modest than what you see happening here in our own region. And back to some of the comments that were made about how do you get that next generation to believe in the potential of what it means to work in the space industry. If you're not hearing those stories on a fairly regular basis, it's not going to connect with you that if you want to work in space, you don't have to go to California or to some other area, but that you have a potential job right here in your own backyard. And I think part of this is us getting much better about not being as humble and celebrating our wins and telling the rest of the world, and starting with our own communities, that there's a real space industry here that's thriving and that offers opportunities for kids and adults.
Great point.
I think one of the, on that note, is, and something that became very relevant to me this morning, or eye-opening rather, is the supply side of space. I think that story is absolutely not being told in the Pittsburgh region, and the niche kind of markets and opportunities in those fields that are different from kind of the travel to space. And so that story and that narrative and who can be a part of that conversation is, I think, a very nuanced conversation that needs to be made public, made proud, and be kind of really transferred to the high schools around the region.
And I'll just add in I remember Senator Capito also mentioning the need to kind of communicate and educate our federal and non-regional players in terms of what the region can do and what the space sector can offer. Well, I guess one last question I'll ask you as a group is, if there's one thing that you'd like for us to revisit next year, and let me preface this by saying we are really eager within the KSC leadership group to create some sort of an ongoing working group around this topic. We've already talked about the Industry Council tie-in, but we're looking for folks that are interested in engaging with us on this to help develop a skills matrix, help develop these communication tools. So I'd like us to think about how do we actually bring together some working groups to move this forward and think ahead to a year from now, what are we reporting out on? So what comes to mind in terms of whether it's metrics or whether it's topics, what should we come back and revisit a year from now?
I'll go.
Please.
The other note that came very super clear to me this morning, the concept of why we would go off our planet to save our planet. I think that narrative and building the connection between climate change, between sustainability, between how the beauty of our planet connects with space is something in the communications and in the narrative of how we talk to students about this. We know kids care about climate change. Like most high schools right now have that conversation happening. How can you learn from what's happening there and apply those same kind of connections and make those systems super clear in front of students? So I think making sure that we're making those connections between what is here and what is out to the outer space era is something that I want to come back to and make sure that we are making those direct and explicit ties in our communications with students.
I think we need to have the goal of working with industry post-secondary partners going into next year so that we can share with educators more broadly. We have mechanisms to distribute information across traditional public K-12 school districts that are easy to get spun up. If we have the goal of establishing that awareness, whether it's a skills matrix or a set of competencies, curricular opportunities, whatever that looks like, having that as a goal, I think, would be really powerful going into next year.
Yeah, I think we have a real opportunity when you look across this room right now, the wealth of resources and connection points and diverse fields that everyone brings to the table today is something that we really should maximize over the next year. A gathering like this is very unusual. It's a first for Pittsburgh. It's a first for this tri-state region, right? And so coming out of this as an organizational member of the Keystone Space Collaborative, right, I am really eager to collaborate with all of you organizational members and individual members to build exactly what we're talking about here. So in the next couple of weeks, I hope we can launch those working groups and really keep these. We've had some great conversations today, and we should keep having these conversations because the answers, I think, are here in this room right now.
I'll add, telling stories is really important, and we use them to try to reduce complexity when we're having a conversation with another person. And often, I bet we've all had this experience where we're starting to tell a story and we can tell that it is not hitting with the other person at all, right? And we all use the same phrase. Let me put this in a better context for you. Context is so important in storytelling. And so as we're talking about our successes in the space industry, especially for communicating to somebody who doesn't have success or hasn't experienced anything in the space industry, telling that story and opening it up to a context to who the other person is so that they can imagine how they fit in it and for it to be aspirational is really important. It's also the key to how we make really great learning experiences, but just in life, I think we find so often, and maybe it's because of the last 2 years of Zoom meetings where you can tell the story that you're telling over Zoom is boring absolutely everyone, right? And so we got to find ways to make those hooks personal so they really become more aspirational and also actionable. I mean, telling a really great story without an action for the other person isn't enough. And so I think as we're evangelizing, what this group in particular can do, think about how you can contextualize your stories and give someone at least one other great person to talk to in the space industry that might really pull an opportunity along.
And Sam Ryman, as a funder of KSC, as you think about, what you want our scorecard to be a year from now, what's sort of top of that list that you're willing to share with this group?
As I had mentioned, our expectations are long-term. We're patient capital, so this isn't a quarterly sort of conference call for us. For us, what we're looking at more than anything is, do we have a handle on data? Are we able to understand kind of where those gaps are? Are we able to begin to think about programs that can be used to fill those gaps as around skill development and kind of other educational outcomes that we know are necessary for individuals to participate in the space industry? And I think beyond that, kind of how are we not just training individuals to be part of an industry where they have a career, but how do we train individuals so that they get to start the next astrobotic, right? For us, economic development is how do we build on that sense of entrepreneurship that resulted in the creation of that company and so many of the other companies that are here and that are going to create jobs and inspire the next generation to go out and start another space company or an ancillary company that supports the industry. So for us, that's the ultimate metric of whether or not this all truly is working and taking hold here in the region. But excited to see where this goes over many, many, many years, and looking forward to being a partner in that journey.
Thank you. So I do think we have some time for some questions, right? So we've got one in the back right there. John.
Hi, I'm John from St. Louis. I work in Ohio by way of Huntsville. Sam and Chris, I think you put your finger on it. Sam, you said that the answer might be in this room. And Chris, you said something to the effect of how do we actually actionize this and make it personal? So if you're a student or a young professional or someone looking for a job, could you stand up? How many are in the room? Go ahead. So that's good. This is somewhere between an ask and a challenge and a request. So Project Filtrum. The filtrum is the little wrinkle in your upper lip right under your nose. It's right there, but you never see it. So here, right under your nose, but we never see it. Maybe at the reception tonight, maybe sometime during the course of the day, let's each make an effort to meet, introduce ourselves, share our experiences with these young folks so that when we do come back next year, one of the metrics that we can say is, 15 students came from West Virginia, Ohio State, Carnegie Mellon, Case Western, and all 15 got job interviews because they came here, because we're putting into practice what we talked about. And for all of you, don't leave home with a business card in your pocket. Give them all away. Okay? Thanks.
Yeah, I just met John this morning, but I love him.
Yeah, I just wanted to pass on a number of resources to you. I ran the 6th International Space Development Conference in 1987 over there in the Hilton. We had a woman, Pat Palazzolo, who was one of the teachers in space. If you know her, she is a powerhouse. She had 300 kids bust into our conference. Some of those went on into the space industry. Some more current resources, there is a company inside the fence line down at KSC. I was in their facility just a couple of days ago, called Space Trek. They are doing these things that are basically water rockets, but with a full instrumented thing so that students in the classroom can actually run thrust tests on rockets. Totally safe, because it's just water and some pressure. Look them up. Another one is involved somewhat with an organization that I am. I'm a director with the National Space Society. It's called the Space Settlement Space Settlement Design Competition. It happens internationally. A woman, Anita Gale, who was a former Boeing person from like 40 years experience, has been doing them for decades. They work with students. She sometimes does them in India and other places. They are wonderful things. They put kids into an environment like they are part of companies putting in RFPs. They've got 3 days. They hardly get any sleep, and they have to come out with the documents at the end of it. So you're really looking at, today, the 3rd space revolution in Pittsburgh. The first one happened in the 60s when there was companies like Westinghouse, Astronuclear. The Nerva rocket design was designed out here in Large, PA. The second one was in the 80s when some of these things I'm talking about are going on, and Rockwell was trying to buy a space shuttle. Westinghouse was building the industrial space facility, but they got closed out because NASA didn't want the competition. And now you've got a new one with Astrobotic leading the way. So build on what is already here and what has been left over from the past.
I love that you brought up Pat. Just to make an observation, Pat still teaches full-time, and Pat religiously joins our educator roundtable meetings every single month. I forget what school she teaches at in this moment, but she's terrific. What was the school?
What was that?
Yes, Upper St. Clair.
Upper St. Clair, okay. More questions? In the back, I wanted to make sure we heard from the students back here.
Okay, so in our school, and like schools in general, a lot of the time students are kind of forced into boxes by their guidance counselor or their advisor based on what they're good on in hopes that they'll go on and do good in college and have a good career. But as you guys are saying, there's like all these different things that can go into the space industry that nobody really knows about. And so you kind of need to like have more experimental, like trying new things with that. So how do you think students can still hone in on their like future while still being able to explore like these different career paths?
What a great question. Who's going to hit him? You stumped them.
No,
They know
I'll
what you're
take
gonna
that.
say.
Right, Grace, that's a great question. I mean, I think we in formal education institutions have limitations and boundaries that we are required to work within, right? I think as an educator, as an administrator, in every context I've ever been in, I try to eliminate tracking systems as much as possible, just so that kids have an opportunity to experience more rigorous and meaningful learning opportunities. I think those are extremely pernicious in our school settings. But I think too that these experiences and opportunities where students are outside of traditional classrooms, engaging with people in industry, in post-secondary contexts are super powerful. And that is always, you will continue to see the challenge of the student to build out a strong foundation academically while still trying to hustle and make it to the next level.
I would also say, Grace, that, and I do this as an older student, is find somebody or watch the room, and if there's someone that's intriguing or makes you curious, go on up to them and say, hey, can you just tell me your story? And then the next question is, can you take me to lunch? And as you grow that relationship over time, it's often those folks that may not be in your career path or trajectory, but might ask you the kinds of questions to build your curiosity, to test what and who you are, and to kind of help you move on a career trajectory that's probably more about who you are and where you want to be than what a traditional school system will teach you.
That's it.
One more question. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add, I mean, it's a tough, I have to answer as the father of two daughters. I feel compelled to give equally bad advice to the person who's here. But, you know, part of the, I certainly, you know, one of the programs of the foundation is health and well-being, and we're looking at research showing that one generation from now we're going to live past 100, right? That longevity is not going to be sort of our career ends at 50 or 60 or 70, but we have to figure out how we're going to continue to build on our skills and figure out how to live productive lives well out into our 80s or 90s. And so when I hear kind of younger generation expressing these or asking these questions of how do I become this by the age of 22 or 23, I think the best advice is to just embrace all of these random opportunities that present themselves to you. Keep investing in the future of yourself, and eventually that future will catch up. There really isn't any other way that you're going to land in that final destination, but just take advantage of every one of those opportunities, and something will finally come together. But realize you've got a long time to go, and you're going to have a lot of different things that you can do over the course of your life.
I actually think that's a fantastic way to end this panel on that thought right there, if you're okay with that. I want to thank all of you. It's been an honor for me to be part of this whole event, a special honor to have helped moderate this panel, and I want to thank you for your participation, and I look forward to continuing to work with all of you because it's really inspiring. So thank you very much.